What is a good YouTube? Butterboy here back again once again. This is my second try doing this video because I just messed up all over. Um, but today I'm gonna tell you guys a story of when I first moved into this apartment. There's this guy. Let's call him Shadow. Shadow. He did some weird ghost spiritual stuff in my grandma's living room on the other side of the wall. Um, so that's the story today because I kind of miss Halloween. I didn't really tell anything spooky. So here it is, your Halloween story. Um, so this summer, I was moving in to this apartment, and basically how this all began when Shadow actually came into me and my family's kind of lives for like a few seconds, I guess. I mean, really come into our lives, but like he kind of hung out, I guess. When my grandma was moving in, he decides to help my grandma, and my grandma started telling him like, "Thank you for the help, all that, right?" Because he helped her move stuff in here, and she like along like how they were like, oh my goodness, my bad. So like as he was helping her, I'm sorry, I'm stuttering. I don't know what's wrong with me today. Um, as he was helping her, she like told him where like she lived at. She lives like across on this hill. From the apartment, she's like maybe 10 miles out. On this hill, and so Shadow for some and like she told him like how the house looked or whatever, and Shadow, he lives like 5 miles away from what's it called? 5 miles away from the high school, which is not that far from my apartment. Um, and so what happened was like I think in the same day or something, or like later on, Shadow walked all the way to my grandma's house, and she told him what it looked like, and he just knew where it was. So he walks up to there's a sliding glass door. He knocks on the window, the sliding glass door, or whatever. And my grandpa gets up and he walks to the door, and he sees Shadow, and he opens it, and like my grandpa, he's all like, hello, and Shadow, he decides to just walks in. He just walks into the house without like my grandpa saying you could come in or whatever. He walks in. He starts walking down to the flipping like living room area, and my grandpa like yells at him. He's like, "Hey, get out of my fucking house," or something like that. And Shadow's like, "I need to talk to grandma real quick," or like he's all like, "I need to talk to grandma," and he walks out. He's like, "Fine," and he's like, "Fine, I need to talk to grandma," when he was like outside, and he walks around, knocks on my grandma's window, and him and her started talking. And what my grandma told me was that apparently he wanted her to drive him all the way down to like Coeur d'Alene or something, and at like right then, because he had all of his stuff packed up. He was gonna like leave. He was gonna run away. For some reason, he didn't tell her, but he just wanted her to take him all the way down to flipping Coeur d'Alene because she told him that if he needed anything, just give her a call and she'll try her best. And my grandma was like, "Oh, I can't do that because I don't want to get in trouble with your family or whatever," and blah 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 blah, right? And so she offered him a ride back to his house. And Shadow's like, "No, it's okay, I'll just walk." And he was mad. And so he walked another like 15 miles back to where he lived. So he walked until like 30 miles at night. And then it was just crazy. And my grandma told me this. I'm like, "There's no way he did that." And grandma's all like, yes, he did. It's crazy. I don't believe it myself. So later, like a few days later or a week, whatever, I can't remember how long ago, my little brother, he was gonna hang out. I was supposed to watch him for the day, and we were going down to this pool. There's a pool across the street, And so me and him went to the pool and we saw Shadow. And Shadow's all like, "Hey, how are you, Anthony?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm doing pretty good, Shadow. How about you?" And my little brother, he's all like, "Hey, do you want to spend the night?" And like as soon as he said that, I'm like, "Please don't say yes. Please don't say yes or anything," because me and Shadow, we are not like that. I didn't know him like that. I didn't want to hang out with him because he's done some weird stuff that I've seen, I've heard, and all this, and just generally nobody really wanted to hang out with him. He was just a weird kid. And so he was like, "Oh, I gotta call my dad first, and then I can see if I can spend the night." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And he walks off somewhere. So me and JC, we were walking to the flipping water park area, or like this pool. It's a really small pool, kinda. And I was asking him like, "JC, does mom know about Shadow or anything? Like, does she know him?" And JC's all like, "I'm spending the night with you." And JC thinks that sometimes whenever I'm watching him. Um, and so I'm like, "JC, no, you're not. You're not spending the night with me." And he's all like, "Yes, I am." And so me and him kind of got into it. But we went to the park, or not the park, we went to the pool, and he was swimming off, and I was there. And I saw few of my friends there. They were lifeguards, so that was pretty cool. And Shadow came back, and he's like, "Hey." I'm like, "Oh, hey." And he's like, "My dad said it was okay for me to stay the night." And I was like, "Oh, well, the problem with that is that JC, he's not spending the night with me. He's staying out at my mom's, so I don't know what to do about that." And he's like, "Oh, well, can't I just spend the night with you then?" And I was like, "I'm sorry, Shadow, but like, I don't know how my grandma would feel about that because there's only supposed to be me there, nobody else, just me." And Shadow straight up looked at me as all like, "Okay, well, your grandma said it was okay for me to come over whenever I want." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like I was just put in a weird position. What am I supposed to do? And he had no way back home, I guess. I just didn't want to be rude. I'm like, "Oh, okay. Um, all right." And he went off and did something else, and I just didn't want Shadow to spend the night with me. It's kind of small in here, and I just like being alone during that time, so I just didn't want him to come over. Um, so like me and my brother, we went back to the apartment, and Shadow followed us, and we're just chilling there, and JC kept jumping on this love seat that we used to have, and he's not allowed to. I'm like, "JC, you're not allowed to jump on the love couch. Get off." And Shadow is all like, "Oh, it's okay for him to jump on the couch when I'm on it." And I was like, "Yeah, but like I just don't want him doing that because he's gonna break the love seat. And my grandma doesn't want that." And she was like, "Oh well, it should be okay if I catch him." And I'm just like, "Shadow." In my mind, I'm thinking, "Shadow, just stop. You're not. No. If I tell you no, and I tell Jason not to do something, stop trying to make it work. He's not happening." But they did it anyways. I got pissed off, and I like grabbed my basketball. I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go down to the park. JC, you want to come with me?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." And Shadow followed. So we're at the park. We're shooting around, whatever. And this girl with like a notebook, she started walking across the park, and we can see her, and Shadow apparently knows her, and he's like, "Hey," and the girl looked at him, and she just kept walking. She turned around and she kept walking. Whoops, I'm sorry, I almost dropped you. And so she was at the bench, and she had this notebook and a pen. She started writing in it, whatever. And we had sodas on the bench she was sitting at. So Shadow went over there, and I was sitting around, and JC went over there to grab a drink. And I walk over there, and like I look in this notebook, and so there's this cartoon character called Bill Cipher from Gravity Falls. If you look him up, he's like an Illuminati character. This girl wrote Bill Cipher in like a human like way or whatever. Like it had there was a guy had a pyramid head, but it was just, like his body was like a human, pretty much. And she looked at Shadow. It's like, oh my god, is that Bill Cipher? And I'm looking at it. I'm like, well, no, duh. In my mind, I'm like, well, no, duh. Like, who else is it supposed to be? And she like started crying. She started crying over this picture. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. So I was like, Jason, let's go shoot around. And my brother is all like, I want to draw in the notebook. I'm JC, I'm sorry, but she's not really, she doesn't seem like in a good mood. We gotta go shoot around, or like, we want to go to the park or whatever. And he decided to stay there and drink some of his soda. And Shadow, he takes the notebook. And he's like, he closes his eyes, he flips to the next page, and he starts scribbling. He starts scribbling all over the oh my goodness. He starts scribbling all over the paper. And like, he scribbles it, and he looks down, and he scribbles something really, really hard, by the way, like multiple times. And he looks back up, and he starts scribbling again, and the girl's still kind of crying. And I'm over here watching this. And the, what's it called? Shadow, he opens his eyes, and he looks down, and he's all like, what does that say? And he moves it to the girl, and she looks at it, she's like, help me, or something like that. She's like, it says help me. What does that mean? And she started crying again. And I'm like, oh my god, Shadow, what the hell are you doing, man? You're making this little girl cry over stupid, like, over something not intelligent. And I don't know what's going on. JC wanted to write in the notebook, but Shadow, like, rips out the page that he wrote in and gave it to JC. I didn't want JC writing into it, but I let him draw, like, a car or whatever for her to make her, like, happy. And, like, he started, like, interrogating me, like, do you have like a lighter or like a fire anywhere, because we gotta burn this. And she's still crying very, very terribly, and I'm like, nah, I don't have any lighters at the house or anything. And so he's like, we gotta burn this. He just kept saying to me, we gotta burn this, we gotta go somewhere and burn this, we gotta burn it. And I'm like, I'm not to help you out with that, right? So the girl take her notebook and pen, and she walks off. And before she walks off, whatever, Shadow and her had like a deep conversation about like spirits, and like how they started talking about this girl named Ruby, whatever, that lived at the apartments. And I wasn't really listening, I wasn't paying attention, so I didn't know what they were talking about. But they were talking about some like spiritual stuff, and how they were spiritual related, and how they have like ghosts speak through them a few times here and there. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, what? You're telling me you're letting demons talk through you? That ain't happening. That's just not happening. There's no reason for that to happen. Why would you want that? So, the girl walks off, and Shadow, me and JC, we walk back to her apartment. We're here right now. We're chilling. It's getting close, dark time, and my grandma had this candle. Oh boy, Jesus. Is this open? It is open. I got hungry. So good. Hold on. Sorry, I got hungry. Anyway, so my grandma, she has this candle, and it's like fairly, really big. And Shadow went over and grabbed it, and it had some like matches. I don't know where he got the matches from. He had some matches. And he moves stuff out of the way, and he sets the candle down in the middle, and he flicks it. And he lights the candle, he's all like, and he looks at me. I was in the living room, and JC was in the living room. And he looks at me, he's all like, I'm gonna talk to Ruby. I'm like, Ruby? And Shadow is like, yeah, I'm gonna talk to Ruby. Is that okay? I'm like, okay. I was like, okay, go ahead. And I'm like, who's Ruby? And he started telling me a story of how there was this girl who was like murdered in this apartment, and she used to live in apartment 6 or whatever. And he started telling me how like she's a spirit that kind of follows Shadow around, or she lives in this apartments or whatever. I'm like, okay, that's cool, I guess. I mean, you could talk to spirits, I guess. And I didn't want him doing that in the house. I'm like, Shadow, are you sure this is okay with my grandma doing this? Because I just don't feel like grandma would want you to do this. and I didn't want him doing it. So I thought he would respect grandma's privacy or like grandma's house. But he didn't. He was like, oh, well, yeah, I've talked to your grandma about this a lot of times. I'm like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure your grandma won't want you doing it in her house. So he explains to me how it works. So as the candle's like flickering, whatever, you're supposed to ask it like yes or no answers, like, um, was the car red? And if it flickered up, it means yes, but if it flickered down, it means no. So that's just like example. So Shadow looked at this candle and he dead ass is all like, Ruby, are you here? And I'm staring at this candle and it's like nothing really happens, like nothing changed. And he looks up at me, he's like, Ruby said yes. I'm like, what the fuck? Dog, the candle, the flipping light didn't flicker up. What do you mean? It said yes. So he started asking it questions about like how his dad was or whatever. And he tells me that Ruby sometimes takes him like spiritually to see his dad, or like Ruby could see all over the world. I'm like, you're telling me this ghost is a god now? Like, the fuck? The fuck are you talking about at this point? Are you high? Are you generally high on rocks? So he started telling me all this crazy shit. And my brother, he started asking him questions. I weren't yes or no answers. And Shadow kind of got mad at him. He's all like, JC, just stop. Please stop asking him questions. And he got really, really mad. And so, the candle was like halfway down. And he's like, bye, Ruby. And he like pinched the flipping like light thing and he went and put it back. And I don't want no demons in my grandma's apartment. I'm starting freaking out. And so Shadow's like, I'll be right back. And he leaves. And I look at JC and I tell him, JC, do not tell mom about this. Do not tell mom about the candle. Because I'm going to be telling her. Because you don't know what you're going to have to say. I have to say it. So don't even tell her or ask her to do this. And he like asked me why. And I told him why. I was like, because it's just not normal to do that in somebody's home. And like I don't think mom want you around this stuff. So just don't even ask her. I gotta talk to her about it. And he's like, okay. So he understands. Shadow's gone for like a long period of time, and JC or my mom's supposed to come up and get JC. So me and JC were there, and Shadow came back, and he looked sad, and he's like, "Hey, my dad's here. He said I have to come home." I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he's like, "No, it's fine." And then he started telling me his like sad family life story. I'm not gonna say it because that's his personal stuff, not for me to say. But like, I'm sorry, but if I don't know you as a friend, if you're not a friend of mine, I just don't really want to hear that. If you gotta tell somebody this stuff, go to like a therapist or a psychiatrist or a therapist or whatever, or go tell a friend, not somebody that you just talked to that day or whatever, or like I actually started talking to. Anyways, so he leaves, and a few minutes later, my mom comes in, and the first thing that JC says to her, as soon as she walks in the door, he's like, can we do the candle trick? I'm like, fuck. I am fucked. I am deep shit right now. So mom's all looking at me, or like looking at JC, and she's like, candle trick, and she looks at me. I'm like, oh, I gotta tell you later. And he wouldn't stop bugging mom about it. And his dad is really religious. He's all like, what candle trick are you talking about? And I didn't want to like tell it in front of him because I didn't want him freaking out about JC witnessing it. So like, yeah. So I was trying to tell mom, like, Mom, I don't want to tell you this right now when he's around, but like I gotta tell you now because JC's bugging her and she's wondering now, and his dad's wondering. So I told him what happened. I told him what Shadow did, and I just didn't know what to do. And they told me what to do in that situation. Like, just tell him no, or like, please don't do that. It makes me uncomfortable. And my mom wouldn't want JC involved around that or whatever. And so they told me that. I'm like, okay. So the next day, everybody's gone. It's just me here. I wake up. I had some money, so I went down to the store to grab something to eat. And I saw Shadow here. Shadow was here. And he saw me walking by the store. He's like, hey. I'm like, hey. And I'm like, and he's all like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going to the store to grab some food. He's like, oh. And then he walks off. And so I grabbed my food. I got some like Tostitos pizza or whatever. Um, Awful breakfast, by the way. Do not have that for breakfast. It's probably unhealthy. I eat something like a bowl of cereal or whatever. Um, I got that and I went back to my apartment and I sat down to eat it. And I heard a knock on the door and I opened it and Shadow was there. He's like, "Hey, do you want to go to the park with me or like you want to hang out?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, but I'm like I was after I'm done eating, I was gonna head to bed." He's like, "Oh, okay, well." If you want to hang out, just let me know. I'm like, okay, okay, Shadow. And I closed the door, and I went back, and I wasn't gonna go to bed. I just didn't want to hang out with him. Very rude. I should have just said what I is. It's better to be honest, but I just didn't want to hurt his feelings. Um, so like, I went back and I started watching YouTube, whatever, and he comes back again. Shadow knocks on the door, and I opened it. He's here, and he's all like, "Hey, there's a water balloon fight going on. Do you want to come and play or whatever?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry, I just don't." And it's in the middle of the day, so I can't use like excuse. I'm going back to sleep. I'm like, "I'm sorry, I don't want. I just don't like water. I generally do not like swimming at all. Kinda like I'd swim in a few places, whatever, but that's about it. I'm just not much of a. I'm not much of a swimming kind of person. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I just don't like getting wet, whatever. And he's like, oh, come on, you can get wet. I'm like, I'm okay. I'm okay, Shadow. I just don't want to go. And he's like, okay, well, there's a volleyball. We're doing a volleyball game down there. We could do that. I'm like, I'm okay, Shadow. I don't want to like do anything today. I just want to stay home. He's like, okay. So he leaves. I went back to bed and I'm doing whatever. I can't remember what I was doing. And what's it called? And like later that night, there was nighttime. It was like maybe 7. He comes back to the apartment and he knocks on the door, and I opened it. He's like, "Hey," I'm like, "Hey," and he just walks in. He didn't ask me if he could come in. He just walks in, and he goes to the kitchen. I have no idea what he's doing, so I'll follow him. And he grabs this candle off the. He grabs the candle off the shelf, and he's like, "I'm gonna talk to Ruby." I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but I don't think Grandma would want you to do that." And he asked me why, and I'm like, "Well," and I told my grandma what happened that night because I called her and while Shadow was there, I was like, "Grandma, I really don't want Shadow here." Because JC asked if he could spend the night, and he's not spending the night with me, and I just don't want to hang out with Shadow. And so me and Grandma talked, and I handed the phone to Shadow because she wanted to talk to him. And Shadow told her that he had no way home until like the morning, and so I had to stick with him for that night. But luckily, his dad came by, picked him up. So, and I told her what's been going on, and I was like, "I'm sorry, Shadow, but Grandma thinks it's like disrespectful of you doing that in her apartment, so she doesn't want you doing it again." And I was like, "I'm sorry," and he's like, "No, it's okay." And he didn't close, but he puts back the candle, and he walks out of the room. He walks out of the apartment. He walks down the hall, whatever. He goes do whatever he's doing. And I'm like, okay, you just came by, walked into my grandma's house without asking, just to talk to Ruby the ghost. Nah, it's not happening. Um, so that's about it, I think. Very, very interesting stuff right there. Um, Very long video. I'm sorry. Um, Anyways, I don't really have an outro, so. But oh wait, hold on. Um, I've seen people viewing my videos. If you want to hear more stories, I'm gonna try to upload daily, as I said in the very first video called "This is Cringe." Um, just subscribe, put that bell on. Um, I'm pretty sure it'll notify you if if I upload or not. Um, as of right now, I do videos after I get off school and I upload them. But soon I'm gonna have practice, so that might come at like 6. from time to time. But yeah, hit the subscribe button. I don't have an outro, so bye.